It's kind of surreal to be back in Toronto right now. Just a week ago, I was in Israel wondering, like everyone else, when the war with Iran could start. Will it happen? When will it happen? Every coffee shop conversation, it's tomorrow. You check the tracker, the percentage is high or low. And yet, here I am on the other side of the world now, feeling a little bit of guilt. More than anything else, though, a little confusion and anxiety around all of the uncertainty. But just because there's uncertainty doesn't mean I get put my head in the sand, although it feels like maybe I want to. Tisa et Rosh, B'nai Israel. Raise your head. Ki Tisa. The Parsha starts off with a counting of everybody. Machatzira shekel. We understand the value of every single person in the nation. When we hear stories of Beit Shemesh, of Tel Aviv, people losing their lives, it hits us. And yet we have to Tisa et Rosh. Even if we feel like perhaps we're not ready, even if we feel like maybe we're just a number we can hide, raise your head. The Parsha brings down a very interesting example of a person right out of the gate. The story of Bezalel. The story of Bezalel, V'nikra b'shem, God tells Moshe, I have called by name. So it's quite obvious right out of the gate that this name is important. Bezalel, or Bezalel, in the shadow or the shade of God. If you think about this person, he's praised for his ability, his amazing craftsman. And the Torah emphasizes that he is called by that name. The Zohar says that this name of his is because all of his abilities came through a divine yesod. And when you think about him, you think about Bezalel as a person who just a few weeks ago was a slave in Egypt. He had no unique artistic masteries. And yet, through this identification of Tzel-El, is able to let go and find creative connection in such a beautiful way that he is able to build the things even at times when Moshe doesn't understand how to do it. Bezalel fully adopts that way of being. And I think perhaps it's this nikra b'shem, this idea of connecting with that name. Perhaps we're able to find a way to connect with that also. Let go. Let go and you'll find connections perhaps where you didn't before. You'll find flow and creativity where you didn't. So Bezalel is gifted with an ability to create gold objects, all the kalim in the Mishkan itself. And in a way, he becomes the antidote to that anxiety. The kesher, he builds the literal place where we can connect to God, even in the wilderness. The irony is that just a few moments later in the Parsha, we're going to bring up the cardinal sin, the golden calf, the chet ha'egel. B'nai Yisrael is surrounded by godliness. We have the man, we have the well, we have all kinds of godly occurrences that have just happened, the Ten Commandments, Matan Torah. And yet, through a miscount of a couple of hours, Moses is gone, they immediately jump to sin. They have anxiety, which blocks them from being able to see that possibility. What are we going to do without our leader? What are we going to do? Unlike Bezalel, who adopts an understanding that he is in the shade of God, they create golden things from a position of fear. And this is how they go off. This becomes the cardinal sin of the Jewish people. And what we learn right after that is a few approaches to deal with anxiety. Hur, who ironically is the grandfather of Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur, he responds directly by resisting the crowd. And he's killed. The Medrash says that he resists and he dies. And I think that this tells us a little bit of how we should deal with fear and anxiety. We can't fight it straight on. There's no way to deal with somebody in that kind of state of mind. Aaron sees this and quickly learns. He brings his chesed approach. And what Aaron does is very, very telling. It's the guidance that we have for anybody dealing with addiction issues, mental health problems. Shorten the focus. He says, let's delay whatever it is by just one day. Not today. Not today. He tells the Bnei Yisrael, tomorrow we're going to do a feast for God. Tomorrow, machar. He just introduces a little bit of patience. And it's this idea that he brings with his midah of chesed that helps validate where the people are coming from. Yes, I understand Moshe is not here. That does sound scary. What are we going to do? We're going to do what we can. Let's bring some gold. We'll see what we can do. And in a way, perhaps an imperfect resolution to the issue, but he does defer them from potentially a worse sin. Now, at the same time, Moshe is not here. He's talking to God. And we see his approach to dealing with this situation is advocacy on behalf of his nation. He argues with God. We saw in last week's Parshat that his name was not in there once. This is where he says that famous statement, Mecheni na misifrecha. And we see here a number of different ways that we can deal with anxiety and with the challenging times. Don't face it straight on as Hur did. Validate, welcome people in, and then advocate on their behalf if something does go awry. Understand that people may step out of their bounds when they're faced with fear. And the Parsha continues with the Yud Gimel Midot. It gives us the response. Hashem Hashem karachum v'chanun erech hapayim v'roch chesed v'emes. Ramban says that the fact that it says Hashem Hashem, we know double lashon always gives us something important to think about, tells us that God is there before and after we sin. There's more after the sin, perhaps, but he's there always. Whether we see him or not, whether we're aware he's there or not, he's there. This is the phrase that we say every year at Slichos, at Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. We repeat it over and over again as we ask for forgiveness. So we understand that there is a path, recognizing God, perhaps understanding that we are in Tzel El, and accepting that he is there is what gives us the ability to move past those kinds of sins and move past the anxiety. Now, there's an interesting parallel between this week's Parsha and what's going on at this point in time. We just finished Purim. The Parsha also discusses somewhere about the idea of Ketoret. And there's an interesting parallel between one of the different types of the ingredients in Ketoret, which is called mordror, or translated in Aramaic as maradachya, which loosely sounds like Mordechai. And this parallel, I think, is quite intentional. It brings it down in this week's Parsha, this connection of Ketoret, which is special ingredients that come. They bring a ruach from us. It's a smell that we understand. We attach our service to God, a feeling of service to God. And at the same time, there's a very interesting contrast here between the story of the Megillah and the story of the Chet, where the Jews in the desert were surrounded by God all the time. Their anxiety peaked, and they acted in a way that took them away from the right path. Whereas the Jews in Purim did not see God at all. He was hidden. And yet they decided to act with conviction, trust that God would look out for them. Again, really reinforcing this idea that trust that God is here for us, Perhaps at this time when we're not really sure exactly what's going on. Now, maybe there are some interesting parallels that we're seeing between Persia at that time and the miracles that we're seeing in today's day and age. I don't know exactly how we're supposed to act, but it's clear that we may face anxiety and we shouldn't act just immediately. Rather, try and shorten the horizon. Understand today is one day. We're going to get through it. Tomorrow will be another day. Good things can happen. And this week's Parsha, this reading, will actually end in a unique way with Parshat Para. So we go from the sin of the calf to the mitzvah of the calf. And Parshat Para at the end is a classic chok. It's this idea that we're going to find a calf that is all red, that's never worked, very rare occurrence. And yet there's a paradox. There's a paradox that the person who uses the ashes of the golden calf to purify somebody else will themselves become impure. Sort of paradoxical approach. Why would I become impure if I'm purifying somebody else? But I think this is really a guidance for today more than anything, is that when we purify somebody else, we are at a risk of influence on ourselves. The purifying of somebody else means that we need to look after ourselves. We need to be aware of the fact that we're going into the belly of the beast, and we can be influenced as well. So perhaps this misunderstood, irrational chok, this law without reason, is precisely the guidance at the end of the Parsha to help us wrap this all up. Understand that sometimes we're going to do things without knowing exactly what's going to happen tomorrow. We're going to trust in certain actions that we just follow for the sake of being told that they are the right thing to do. We understand that we have to look after ourselves in this time of anxiety, when there's impurity around, when there's challenge. We understand that validation and recognition is perhaps the key, and to think about things only in shorter time horizons, not worrying about all of the potential things of the future. And that we understand that we are in the Tzel El, and that the more that we connect with that way of being, feel that, we'll be able to find creative connections and be in a state of flow to be able to build the right things with gold. So with that in mind, I guess sending strength to anyone who needs it, and blessings for a very real Shabbat Shalom.